Ding. And we are live. Welcome to the ServiceNow Live Coding Happy Hour for November 18th, 2016. This is a very special one for a couple reasons. First, I'm going to introduce our special guest. The first time we've had a special guest on the Live Coding Happy Hour. Welcome, Andrew Barnes.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Give us a real quick intro to the wonder that is you, Andrew.
All right. So I am a ServiceNow architect at a healthcare organization in North Carolina, and I am super excited to be here today. I've been doing ServiceNow as an architect for about 3 years now.
Fantastic. And with me, as always, is my partner, Josh Nerius.
Yeah, my name is Josh Nerius, as Dave said, and I'm a developer evangelist in the developer program here at ServiceNow. And Dave?
All right. And I'm Dave Slusher, also developer evangelist at ServiceNow. If you want to see what Josh and I do, go to developer.servicenow.com, and you can get a free instance and do all the fun stuff. So we got a couple things. We're going to do a little bit of just kind of mentioning things we realize we have under-mentioned. So very first thing, we're going to talk about beers, and we're going to toast ourselves because today is Josh Nerius and my 3-year anniversary with ServiceNow.
Yay.
Cheers.
I am celebrating with a Terrapin Liquid Bliss chocolate peanut butter porter.
Oh, that sounds so good. And I've got a Sam Adams Winter Lager, and it promises to be warm and festive.
And I've got a Highland Gaelic Ale.
That is from
Very
Asheville,
delicious. I do believe it is from Asheville, North Carolina.
Fantastic. We've got so I got Georgia, you got North Carolina, and then we got wherever it is, Massachusetts.
Yeah, it should be Boston. Yep.
All right.
Something like that.
So let me go ahead and lock the screen on you, Josh, if you want to share, and then we're going to talk a little about the events page, which we realize we have never really discussed as much as we ought to.
All right.
Oh,
so
I locked the screen to the wrong person. Let me lock it to you.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Let's see if I can get this thing to share correctly. All right. Let me know if that looks okay.
We see it just fine.
Perfect. So if you haven't come out here before, the ServiceNow events page tells you what's going on, where it's going on, related to the developer program. So if you go to developer.servicenow.com, click on events at the top, you'll get a list of things that are coming up. So here we are at the top. This is our live coding happy hour that we're doing right now. But you can also see things like upcoming meetups. You see we've got a couple of those. The London Hackathon. Here's another meetup kickoff in the Bay Area. So this is actually just kicking off. So this is a great resource if you're interested in meeting with other ServiceNow developers, learning more about the platform. Come out here and watch for stuff. It's a great resource.
And of course, I have to plug that the RDU, the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, be covering Istanbul developer tools.
Absolutely, yes, definitely. So if you're interested in Istanbul, definitely come and check out one of these meetups. As you can see, there's a common thread about Istanbul just with these meetups that are coming up. So good stuff. And I would normally be at that Raleigh-Durham meetup, except I'm going to be presenting at the London one that same day. So unfortunately, hate to miss it, but such is life. So.
Can't time zones get you there at the right time?
Unfortunately not. All right. So we just wanted to mention that because I don't think we've ever mentioned it on one of these, that the events page at the developer portal is a good resource to find interesting events in the world and online. All right. So now let us get to our main topic. So Josh is going to be driving today. So tell us a little about what you're going to be presenting today, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to be presenting today is an application called the My Work app, but it's not just a ServiceNow application. It's actually a Node.js Express application. And this is something that ServiceNow has put out. So if you go out to github.com/ServiceNow, you can find this thing. It's called the Example REST Client My Work app Node.js. It's not a mouthful. But what this is it's a Node.js application. It's using Express.js, and it's paired with a scripted REST API on the ServiceNow side. And it's kind of a bootstrap. It's a way to get started with building an application external to ServiceNow that then interacts with ServiceNow. So here's a little bit of an architecture diagram of what's going on. We've got a couple of things that we'll dig into this in a little bit more detail. But today's live coding happy hour is really all about first setting this up. We're going to go through the process of cloning it, installing it, and getting it configured with my employee instance. And then there are some potential improvements we want to make and some things that I want to implement once Istanbul is released. There are some planned features in Istanbul that we can leverage. And so this is really set up to also a future live coding happy hour. So that's what we're going to do. So with that, if there's anything else to cover, Dave, I need to see if I can successfully share out a couple more windows here. So bear with me just a moment.
All right. I want to go ahead and hide the participants. I think that works. So that should be our little icon should be gone. So it should be you with the whole screen.
Perfect. And can I share multiples, or do I just have to share my whole desktop? That's the question.
I don't know if you can share multiple applications.
I believe it's one application or the whole desktop.
All right. I guess you all are getting my whole screen. So let me just make sure that everything is good and I don't have my password manager up or things like that.
That is a little discussed occupational hazard of this. Like when I'm doing the presentation, the 3 minutes before we go live are this panic of what's on the screen I don't want on the screen.
Yep, absolutely. So, all right, here we go. So screen is shared back out. You've got everything, so we'll go with that. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to clone this application. And if you've never done anything with Git, this is actually pretty simple. We just need to find the repo URL. And the other thing I should note before I get into the steps is if you want to do this on your own, this is very well documented. So come and look at this. There's a step-by-step guide on how to actually get this up and running. And you can just go through those steps.
I'll attest to that because I went through those steps just 30 minutes ago and bam, they were super easy and clear.
That's awesome. So that's, and you'd never seen this before, right?
Yep, never seen it.
Perfect. So let me go out here. I've got a folder ready to go, and I'm just going to start by cloning this. And one thing I should note as well is if you want to make your own changes to this, something that's really useful is you can fork this. So if you click fork, what it's going to do is it's going to make a copy of this repository on your own GitHub account. Then you can make changes and commit those changes and keep track of them on your side. So it's a great way to say, hey, I'm starting from this state, but I want to then continue working forward from there. So I've cloned this thing, and let's see what we've got. So we've got our example REST client folder. We will go into there. And there's a common convention with Node applications. If we look at this thing called package.json, this package defines all of the dependencies for this Node app. So we've got a couple of things. We're using the client sessions, we're using Express, and a few other things. And to bring down those dependencies, all we have to do is type npm install and let this thing chug away and do its work. So what this is doing now is it's going out there, and in a matter of, wow, that was actually a lot faster than I thought it would be. We got all of this stuff that's necessary to make this application work, which is kind of the beauty of Node.js. If you haven't worked with it, there are, dependency management and application development is always a fun topic, and Node seems to do an okay job taking care of all of that.
Hey, Josh, do you want to take 1 second and kind of talk about why you and I more or less decided to standardize ourselves on Node?
Yeah, so that's actually a good point. So there are a couple of things. I mean, one thing that is always interesting when you're dealing with Node, it is JavaScript. And so all the work that we're doing on the ServiceNow platform is JavaScript. It kind of makes sense to say, hey, let's stay in the JavaScript domain. Whereas if we're switching back and forth between JavaScript and Ruby or Python. I mean, I love Python, but there's definitely some context switching. So that's a big part of it. Dave, did you have additional factors there for yourself?
That was the main reason, but we had kind of there's a reason now why we don't even use Node tools instead of PowerPoint. Even we sort of like it's kind of the decision we made amongst ourselves is. Anytime we need to do an external tool, if there's a Node version, that's our first choice. Yeah, for practically anything. Because and part of it was, I believe I explicitly said, if we're going to be professional nerds, let's be professional nerds.
Yep, and being a professional nerd is why I do this job. So yeah, absolutely going to stick with this stuff. So with that, we've pulled everything down. And the first thing I want to do is go back to the documentation and see how we can start this. And let's see. So let's scroll down. So we need to run this thing called server.js. And now we have a server listening on localhost. So let me go ahead and pull that up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of the application in a minute, but I just want to get this up and running first. So we see right off the bat, we've got this user session invalidated. It looks like there's a typo there. So there are some things that we can potentially clean up, and that's part of what we're going to work on today. If I go and try to log in somewhere, let me go and try to log into my employee instance. Apparently, I actually have the app installed in my employee instance for the My Work update set. So let me spend a moment and talk about the My Work update set. What this application is doing is it's actually talking to a scripted REST API. So I'm going to go into Nerius. I'm going to pull up that scripted REST API, and we're going to see what things are available to it. So when you do install this, the one step that I had done in the past and did not demonstrate today was the act of actually installing the Task Tracker API update set. That's something you'll have to do. So this REST API introduces a couple of things. So we have this thing called My Tasks. So if we go out there and hit this endpoint, this is going to run some code. Take a quick look at that code. It's not too complicated. We've got this thing called Task Retriever. And then we say, go and get the task records for the current user, which we see we're defining here. And so to further demystify this, let's just look at Task Retriever really quick. Actually, to make this much easier, I'm just going to fire up Studio. Open up the My Work app. And all the Task Retriever is doing is simple glide record queries. So, we're saying go and get all the task records for a user. We're going to pass in a user ID. We're going to go and look at the task table. We're using glide record secure, which means we're applying ACLs. We're going to say, give me active stuff, and then just return it. So that's all the scripted REST API is doing. And the reason that this is implemented is when you think about the construction of an application, you could use the table API. But when you do that, you're opening up your application to need to make adjustments as the system changes. So maybe there are changes made to access controls, or maybe there are differences in how one instance is compared to another. The scripted REST API allows you to have this constant endpoint. And I think we've talked plenty about scripted REST API, so I'm not going to harp on that, but just want to comment on the fact that that's why this is there. So with that, let's go back to our app and let's take a look at what it can do. So we'll go to My Tasks. We can click on one of these. We can see that we can actually add comments. And when we add a comment, this is actually going to go back and call that scripted REST API. If we were to then go and take a look at this item, and let me just pause for a second. Chrome is doing this crazy thing where I can't copy out of a read-only field.
Yeah,
It drives me crazy.
That
I have
happened
noticed
about
exactly
a
the
week
same
and a
thing.
half ago.
Yeah.
I don't know when that happened. Yeah,
It was recent.
it drives me nuts. And it's especially bad if it's a really complicated, like I was trying to copy, I think it was a client ID from an OAuth thing, and it was like a 32 character sysid looking value. And like, there's no way I can get this thing. Anyway, I digress. So if we go and actually look at that, we would see that the comment was added. But what I want to do now is actually dive into the code and actually see how is this thing doing what it's doing before we start to make some changes. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the thing that we just cloned.
So for me in the audience, while you're pulling that up, how long did how long did it take you to put this together?
So that's a great question. I did not actually build this app, and that's one of the funny things about it. So this application was actually built by several members of the platform development team here at ServiceNow, and really with the goal of just getting something out there that demonstrates these use cases. So I'm lucky in that I didn't have to actually build this, But what it means is now that we've got this baseline, I can build what I want. I have specific things I want to do. I want to work on OAuth. I want to do other stuff, and I don't have to build all of this sort of boilerplate core things that they've already taken care of.
Great, thanks.
So yeah, absolutely. I can find out how long, but I don't, it wasn't too bad. One of the things to note is that we are using this thing called Express.js. And if you look at the Express website, you can go off and look at this on your own. But Express is basically a minimalist web framework for Node that makes it easy to get things up and running quickly. And so if you're curious as to some of the things you're seeing, what you're seeing is actually the Express framework. So if we look at server, the server.js is really the entry point into this application. And we're doing a variety of things. We're registering, we're importing some packages, we're setting up loggers, we're instantiating some stuff. And then as we go further on down, we can actually see where these routes are. So the routes are what define when we go to a particular URL in a browser, what is it that we're going to return? So that's what's going on here. And then finally, we start the whole thing. There's a second component to this, though, and that is that in addition to an Express app, this is also an Angular app. And this gets interesting because you have an Express application on the server side acting as sort of the API layer. This is the application layer that's passing data back. And then you have the Angular application that is interacting with the Express application. And so you have sort of two different sets of concerns. One is worried about backend data logic interacting with ServiceNow. The other is just concerned about interacting with the Node process on the server. So just kind of an architectural note there and something that we'll see throughout. With that, I'm just going to open up a few more folders. If you are looking at this from the Angular side, we've got a simple index. So this is a single page application, and our standard Angular stuff where we're doing Angular routes. We're saying, go out there, and when we go here, render this. When we go there, render the task list, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that I noticed when I first installed this right off the bat was that some of it is a little confusing. When I look at my server code, I see this thing called /tasks, and I think that's what's actually going on. That's what's going to show the tasks to the end user. But in reality, it's the Angular route to tasks that shows the tasks. The server route to tasks is just returning JSON data back to the client. So one of the improvements I want to work on today is to start renaming these a little bit to make it a little bit more clear what's actually going on. So for example, tasks is probably more accurately called API tasks because this is really the server API that our Angular app is then interacting with. So with that, I'm just going to pause for a brief moment and make sure any questions so far or clarifying things, Andrew and Dave, before we sort of start going through some changes here.
Take 1 second and look at the YouTube. And
the YouTube is looking strong.
All right.
Cool.
Do not see any questions in there. So.
Okay, cool. So with that, the first thing that we noticed when we logged in, and I'm just going to show you what this looks like again. When I first hit this website, it comes back, and instead of actually saying I'm not logged in, go and actually log in, I'm getting this thing that says user session invalidated. And so what this is telling me is that we're not doing a proper is authenticated check. We're not doing the proper checks to determine if the user actually has a session and then redirecting them. We're actually making them click log out to log in, even if they never logged in to begin with. So that's kind of the first thing that I want to take a look at. So I guess the best way to do that is we can look at the, let's see, what do we want to do here? What we want to do is take a look at the task list and determine what's happening in the task list to actually give us this error. Because instead of getting this error, we want, we don't want this error, we want to get the login page. So let's take a look at task list controller. And actually, I want to find out where that thing is coming from. So let me look for the misspelled word session. There it is. It's in the task dispatcher. And this is coming back. Let's fix that typo. And it's saying server response.status 401.send. So this is basically sending a 401 back. What we really want to do here is say when we get a 401, we're going to redirect. So let's see where get tasks is being called. And that is getting called here. Let's take a look there. So here's the error message. We're saying error message is data. So right off the bat, I think what we want to do. Do you happen to know off the top of your head how to do a location or a redirect in Angular? I think it's.
I don't, but I can look it up in the background while you.
I think it might be location. I know there's a location API. Let's see here. Is it location.path? You know what? So I'm going to take a step back.
You can use Angular has a window, so you can use window location href. That's what I'm seeing. There's also location path, location.path. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. Location.path. So that sounds like that'll work for us then. So, I just realized something, and that is that the problem is if we put it here, if we say go and try to get tasks, and then if we're not authenticated, redirect, we're going to have to do this everywhere. We're
right. What if you extend it to something that's not tasks?
Exactly, yeah. So if we, it could be a task detail page, it could be adding a comment, it could be all over the place. So we want something a little bit more generic than that. I think, so this is where we're going to have to do probably a global thing within the app. And I know that there's a way, I think was it route change? Let's just look that up really quick. Angular route change. Because I've seen this before. I think it's route change start. Where basically what we can do is we can say intercept things when a route changes, and the route changes is somebody clicking on something. Yeah, this is what we want. So scope on route change start. We can then do something conditionally here to say, does the user have a session? If they don't, then redirect them. If they do, then let it continue. So I think that's the path we want to go down here. So let's go to. So we can define this inside of here. This is where my Angular is a little bit questionable. But
I think you don't want the dollar on, right? You want dollar on there?
I think you do. That's what they did here before it.
Okay.
Which is why I'm going with it. But I guess we'll find out.
I actually don't know what that notation means.
Yeah, I think it just means it's an Angular specific thing. I'm not really sure either, to be perfectly honest with you. Maybe one of our Angular experts in the crowd can tell us. So event next current is, I think, the typical form here. And I'm just going to log this to see what's happening. So the event, let's log all of these and let's take a look.
I think you want console.log, right?
Yep. Thank you. And that is why there are 3 of us.
It takes a village.
It does.
And as I like to say, log all the things.
Yes, logs. All right, so let's bring up the console. Let's see what we're getting back. Getting back weird stuff. I'm missing a thing. I'm missing the word function. That would help. Okay, there we go. So we're getting object, route change start. We're getting, that's the next, basically where it's going to. And then this is telling us it's an XHR. We don't want that. I don't see the third log. It's not liking something. Well, basically what we want here is to check for the current user, which by the way is not defined. So what I want to do is we're just going to say, let's console.log the root scope at current user. Again, understanding this is not yet defined. And now what I want to do is actually go and define this. So I want to say when we actually log in, let's set root scope.currentUser so the entire application has access to who's the current user, so that we can then come back and key on that here. So to do that, we have to go back and sort of deconstruct the login services themselves. So let's take a look at the login controller. And right now we're saying when you log in, just send the person to location.path of tasks. What I want to know is what other data we get back. So I'm just gonna log the data here. Login data and see what we get. So let's actually do a login. I would love to store the name of the instance too, because you have to type it every time right now.
Okay. I, of course, put my whole instance in there when I was doing it. So GTPS and the .service. I didn't read the instructions. I was
I could definitely see. Okay, I'm logging too much. Yeah, I can see where that would be problematic and cause some issues. Let me just
and the first thing I saw is I tried to point it at my local instance, and I can't because I'm gonna have to go in and hack that because it's assuming the ServiceNow.com. Like, oh, I can't point it to anything that's not in a ServiceNow.com address.
Yeah, what I would love to see is for basically to say if it has HTTP or HTTPS in it, or if it looks like an entire URL, just take it verbatim. Otherwise, concatenate it.
At least it is rendering what it's going to go to, which is very nice. So if you look, you can fix it quickly.
This is true. So this is just logging and it's saying object. So apparently I'm coercing this into a string, which I need to not do. So let me go back.
In your window over there, are you able to find the local script so that you can debug it? Because a lot of times with live objects like that, I have it seems faster and easier to just catch it in the debugger and inspect it that way.
That's a good point. Well, the good news is it actually came back this time. Where I never know where to look is in a situation like this. It's inside a closure. Is basically how you get to the variable that you want, which always gets weird to me. Which I guess I could have thrown that in a scope variable. That probably would have taken care of it. Good news is we have it here. So what this is doing is this is going back, and when I log in, it's returning. It's my user record.
It's the whole user record. That's
exactly what it is. Yeah. So actually, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to store the sysid. I'm going to treat the sysid as the current user, and you know what? No, I'm going to store the whole user. I'm going to say current user is this object, and that way, if we ever want more information about it, we can go back to it. So root scope, we do have root scope here. So let's put that here.
When I saw the locked out field, I said, "Oh, that's this user." There you go. That's the dig giveaway.
Yeah, that is a good call. So array. So this is an array. We want the first. It's result. So we want data.result 0. This is a very trusting way to get the information back, but we're just going to go with that for now. And now, if we go back to our app, we've got, this is logging root scope.currentUser, and let's just say .sysid and see what happens. Log out, log in. We're going to be doing that a lot. And what did it do?
You've got, I think you're also doing a console not log somewhere in there. I think it's part of it.
Yeah, so there's the console. Let's take a look again.
Yeah, you're not doing, you're doing console but not log in that one you just were working with.
Why am I doing that? I've never done that before. Because I'm live, that's why.
Yeah.
All right. And now if we change our route, theoretically, as the route changes, will we see anything different? It doesn't, yeah, so it's saying cannot read property sysid of undefined. So it doesn't know it's there yet. So something's not quite.
No, go ahead and log out one time. Log out and log back in, and let's see if we can see if it's logging the sysid on successful login, because the logging wasn't working.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's refresh.
Let's just see what it says on that, like on successful login. Uh-oh. Did I lose everybody?
I believe Josh has dropped.
Oh, okay. I thought it was me.
Well, yeah,
right,
we'll have to fill some air here.
You're gonna have to tap dance a little bit. All right, let's see. We'll give Josh a little minute. So, let's see if that's him coming back.
There's he back. I see changes.
Are you back, Josh?
Oh, am I gone?
Yeah, we lost you for about 10 seconds there.
Oh, so. That's not good. All right. Well, hopefully I'm still here and I will remain here. And it did say current user. It came back and said current user. So
yay.
So the question is, if I click, as I click around, it still knows that the current user is this person. So, so at this point, we actually now can tell, have I gotten something back? And hopefully now we can key on this and determine whether or not we should allow the user to continue. So with that, I will come here, and I'm basically just going to go if root scope user and root scope dot current user dot sysid. Actually, I'm going to say not.
And so this will very handily also deal with, when the session times out as well, not just the first time you load it.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Right. Exactly.
Is that gonna?
I don't think that's gonna work there, is it? I need this inside. And so we want location path login. All right, give that a shot. Let's go into an incognito window. Edit. It didn't do it. So let's see what's in the console. You know what? No, we have a location there. I just want to make sure we injected the location, and we did. So what doesn't it like? Can't read property sysid of undefined. Am I logging?
I think logging might be killing your function.
I think you're absolutely correct. Let's give that another shot. Boom.
What's funny is in the Slack channel, Corey Searing recently had a story of exactly that, where by diligently logging lots of stuff, he created an error that wouldn't have otherwise existed. In exactly that kind of situation, right, where you weren't conditionally looking to see if that existed, hits that thing, your log statement causes an error, and then causes the rest of the function to die.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it can be that's changing.
Exactly. It's Schrodinger's logs. So we have, it appears to be a successful implementation of this. So let me, just to prove it, let's go ahead and get a fresh incognito session and hit it, and we're there. So that's good. Now let's see if it actually works after I log in. Losing me again?
All right, never mind. I thought I had an artifact on my screen that I thought you had something wrong, but that's okay. You're good.
Cool. You never know with these live coding happy hours. Some of the time, the technical difficulties are lots of fun. Okay, so I think we have a successful implementation, and in theory, this should handle most situations where we are not authenticated or we don't have a session. So now we don't have to go and do this on every single thing. We don't have to check everywhere. Now there's still the possibility, and this is where things are going to get, again, a little interesting. If we look at a controller like the task list controller, say we're logged in and we have our session, but we have our stuff in our Angular scope, but something could time out on the Express side. or on the connection to ServiceNow. So we could hit this, we could get a 401 back, and still have an issue. So that's something to consider. I'm not prepared to think about that one right now. I would rather say let's try to make sure that the application is in sync timing-wise, but that is something that we would want to improve upon further to make sure that we're not just giving errors back to the user. But I think we're already a lot further along than we were. So let me take a look at my list, because I have a list of other things that I've observed about the app that I think we want to fix. So now that we have the login redirect behavior, what I want to look at is what it would take to implement a different flow or a different kind of login. And I want to warn you that this is going to be a little dicey, because this is probably the most complex aspect of this whole thing, and it doesn't exist in any way, shape, or form. But I think we're going to try to get somewhere with it, and then we'll pick it up if we don't get through all the way. So today, what we're doing, as you saw in the beginning, is we're just passing in a username and a password. And then what that's doing is that's calling this login service. The login service is calling the login endpoint of our scripted REST API. And what we're simply saying is, if my login and if my username and password works in ServiceNow, then we're good. But there are some limitations with that. So for example, every time you hit the application, you're going to have to type in your username and password. Maybe your instance doesn't have username passwords locally there. They may not be available to you because you're using SAML or you're using some kind of SSO. And those are situations where you can't just directly use the username and password. So generally speaking, that's where something like OAuth comes into play, because OAuth allows us to say we're going to log in, but we're going to log in on the target system and let that target system authorize or authenticate and authorize the things that we're going to do, and then pass that authorization back to the application in the form of a token, and then the application uses a token from that point on instead of a username and password. The caveat or the limitation today is that ServiceNow does not support this thing called OAuth code or auth code grant flow. And auth code grant flow is what you see when you log into applications that say, sign me in with Google, or grant access to my Facebook account on behalf of this application. If you've ever done that, you've probably interacted with auth code grant flow. ServiceNow in Helsinki and in prior versions has support for password grant flow, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but not the other thing. Now, the support for the other thing is planned in a future release. It's coming just around the corner. That is planned, but it's not there today, so we're not going to be able to implement that right now. But what we can do is start to set up all of the plumbing to make that work with the existing OAuth flow that is supported. And then in a future session, we will make it even cooler. So with that, I want to talk about passport.js. And if you're building applications in Express, Passport is really your simplest way to get some kind of authentication up and running. This has support for stuff like Facebook, Twitter, Google, all of these different things. If you click and view all strategies, they have more than 300 different strategies for how can you support authentication and login in some way, shape, or form in your app. So what we want to use today, and this is where we're getting into 100% uncharted territory, is I want to see if I can set up this OAuth 2 password grant, which we currently support in Helsinki, and then replace the basic auth thing that we're doing today so that we could actually store a refresh token. And even if the token expires, we could then go and get a fresh token without having to make the user log back in. So that's the goal. See what we can do in the next 20 minutes.
So Josh, before you get to that, just to recap where we're at, you've taken the out of the box, the out of the box Node REST client app from Git, and you're extending that now. So are you, for example, are you the stuff that you just did for the login redirect? Are you going to submit a pull request back to that project?
I am going to submit a pull request and try to get some of these things that are sort of quality of life or just things that are maybe slight improvements or enhancements that just should be there anyway. I'm going to get all of that merged back into the main repo eventually here.
And there's no reason there. Part of the reason that it's out on GitHub is there's no reason anyone couldn't submit a pull request.
Right.
Correct.
And if you don't want to put it back into the main, we can just maintain a fork.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's what I'm going to do initially is during this time when I'm working through the process of trying to figure it out, I'll keep this in my own fork. And then once things have gotten to the point where I feel like they're ready to go, I'll start submitting some pull requests to get that functionality merged back into the main thing. And during that time, you can also get to this from mine, so you don't have to go out there. If you want to see the latest and greatest, we can certainly share the URL to my repo, and these changes will be there. So with that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about inbound OAuth in ServiceNow. So in a couple of previous sessions, we talked about outbound OAuth and how can we talk to services that require OAuth authentication, but we've never talked about inbound. And so ServiceNow has support for, again, password grant flow. And I'm just going to set one of these up right now so you can see what this looks like, and then we'll see if we can wire it up. So to do that, we go into our OAuth application registry and we click new. You can see I've created a few OAuth registries in my instance here. And what we want to do is create an OAuth API endpoint for external clients. So this tells it that we're not trying to connect to something else. We're trying to let other apps connect to us. And I'm just going to call this my work app. You'll notice that I'm actually in the my work app, so it's going to get associated with that application anyway. And when I save this, what this is going to do is automatically going to generate a client secret. And that client secret is something that then has to be passed to the endpoint in the instance in order to get a token back. We have our default token lifespan. So what we're saying here is that the refresh token can live for 8.6 million seconds. If anybody knows what that is in days off the top of your head. And then it expires.
I think that's a week.
That sounds plausible.
All right.
Let's see. 100 days.
100 days?
That's a long time.
Huh.
So this is something to think about. And so just again to refresh everyone's mind on what a refresh token is. A refresh token is a thing that persists after the access token goes away. So the access token only lives for 1,800 seconds. And after that goes away, if we didn't have a refresh token, the user is going to have to say, here's my username, here's my password all over again in order to keep working. But because we have this refresh token sitting around in our application, we can use that to get fresh access tokens. So now to actually show what this looks like, if you go to docs.servicenow.com, and we're just going to look at Helsinki here and look for inbound OAuth, and we'll see if we actually find what we want. We've got a REST OAuth example. And what's going to happen is we're going to get an access token by sending these things to the ServiceNow server. So we go to the OAuth token.do, and we give it our client ID and our client secret. And then on top of that, we give it a username and the password. The username and the password are the same things that I was using a minute ago for basic auth. So in my case, admin plus whatever my password is. And so this is just a local username and password in the instance. Then what this does is this is going to give us a response back that looks like this. And this is going to, it's a bearer token. It expires in X number of seconds. And then we have our refresh token and the access token. And then for all subsequent requests, instead of passing our username and password, we pass the access token. So this is a security thing as well. It allows us to be, allows us to not pass username and passwords back and forth all the time.
Or store them.
Or store them. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the key things about OAuth is not storing credentials. So that's huge. Now, it is important to say that these tokens are obviously sensitive because you can use these to interact with the system as that user. Now, you can revoke them. So if maybe the user lost access to, lost control of their accounts, or somebody somehow got access to something, you can revoke a token for a user, and then that token is no longer good. That user's password, username and password, those credentials are still protected because they've never been stored anywhere. So that's kind of a key component to this. So with that, we want to take that configuration and now combine it with the OAuth to password grant. All this. And let's go ahead and stop our server. We'll do npm install.
And that's another one of the nice things about using Node.
Absolutely true, yes. When you're using Node, everything is going to go out to this npm repository. And in this case, because we have a application package manifest, when we type -- save, it's going to install it, and it's then going to add the dependency to our package.json. So now you'll see that this is a dependency here automatically, and it's going to continue to be installed. So if I go and check this, or if I go and commit this to GitHub and you install it, then it's going to be there for you. That's pretty cool. Now we've got to figure out how to use it. So what we want to do here, let's just take this code and copy it. Actually, we need Passport as well. So we're going to install Passport. It's called just Passport.
Yeah, you missed an S in the word. There you go.
Thank you, Dave. There we go. So now we've got Passport. And we'll take a look at our app here. We'll say password strategy. And we want to put my instance in here. And if you recall, it's OAuth_token.do. If you haven't noticed, I spend a lot of time working with OAuth these days.
So the hard coding of that in there. So what does that do if I was trying to log into a different instance? Is this always going to be asking your employee instance for an OAuth token?
It is, and so that's something that we definitely want to consider and probably do some sort of configuration file and say when you, we would put these into config.json as an example, and that way you can set these up when you install the app.
But wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you go towards the instance name from the
yeah, grab the instance name from the login page that we already have?
That's actually a really good idea. I think. The challenge, let's think about that. So the thing to think about here is that right now we are on the server side. We don't currently know anything about what's happening on the client at this stage of things. So we have to figure out how to get the value from the form into here. So
probably maybe leave that blank now. Well, I don't know. So actually, I'm getting ahead of it. So let's get the thing working, and then we can.
Yeah, get it working, and then we can make it better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. I don't want to have to deal with 10 different URLs because we're thinking about it in a naive way. So yeah, we've got that, and then the same thing with the client ID. We definitely would want to put that client ID in some kind of a config file, or maybe even have an interface where somebody can enter that. Now, what I don't know is, let's go back and look at our documentation and see what's actually happening. So we need to set up a route in order to actually deal with this. So we've got passport, request body, username. Oh, this is going to get fun. And we're not going to finish it today. I am warning you because this is going to get a little weird. But let's at least get the route going. And what this is doing is we're defining a new route that says anytime we go to auth handler, call the authenticate, or make sure the authenticate function returns. Express has this concept of middleware, meaning that you can inject code anywhere throughout the system. So in this case, we're saying when this is called, make sure that this completes before then executing this function. So if authenticate doesn't succeed, we're not going to redirect the user to, in this case, we're going to redirect them to tasks because that's what we want to do. And now this method has to succeed. So now let's take that method. We'll just copy it. And there we go. So we're saying passport authentication or authenticate password grant. And this is the thing that we have to work out now, is where are we getting the username and the password? Because if we go and, just to, whoops, let's start this. Missing an argument. What line? Server.js 27. Something we did earlier. Doesn't like new passport strategy. We're passing in an object. Then we're giving it a function. Do we need just another of these? Yeah, we do. Okay. Here we go. Let's start the server again. Let's go back to auth handler and let's just see what happens when we hit it. So we can't read the property username of undefined. What that's telling us is that there is no request body, because at this point, this is a get, so there's not going to be a body. So let's take a look at what they're doing with the current login, because we effectively want to do the same thing. We want to say that we just want to move this functionality into something similar to what the current login process is, but for OAuth. Let's look at common dispatcher. Yep, there's a login dispatcher that's got a login function, so we could do something like that. There's also SN API, so maybe this is where we want to start, is having some sort of body of functionality like this. When the realization hits that you have 9 minutes left and a half an hour of work to do.
That's called real life.
That is called live coding happy hour. All right, so let's actually take a step back, because I don't want to dig into something too deeply without being able to actually follow through on it here. So effectively what we want to do is we want to take exactly what we're doing now on the client. So let's go back to our login service, where the login service is calling the login endpoint. The login endpoint is then calling the login dispatcher, and the login dispatcher is then calling the SN auth service that we created before. So effectively, we want to duplicate that same process and determine how do we, basically, do we want to call one authorization type versus the other. So that's what we want to set up. Let me just go back to my list of things and see if there's anything else we can finish up in our last 10 minutes here. And so I've got optimizations we can make. We can improve the login redirection behavior, which we did. We can improve the naming of API routes. So you know what? Let's just take the opportunity to do that, because I think that's something that we can finish up by the end here. And then when we resume, we'll talk about actually getting into the implementation of that logging component. So what I mean by improving API routes is when you look at this today, it's not clear what's going on, and that when you actually call login, this is actually an API. This is not a page that displays. What we're actually displaying is the index page, and the index page is then calling all of these things. So when we're structuring an app like this, we probably want to do something a little bit closer to this. So I'm just going to break the whole thing by starting to set up some APIs. There's some API routes instead. Logout, I think it's still fair to say that that's not an API route, because that's something that's happening in the app itself. And do we have any other routes to do? We do not. So, but now what we have to do is we have to actually go and configure our various components to call those, because if we actually try to run this now, everything's going to break. And prove that. Can't post a login because login doesn't exist. So let's start with our login dispatcher. So let's just do a global search for /login. How's that? So we have it here. An authenticator. Oh, you know what it's doing? This is searching the entire tree, including all of our library code. So we don't want that. So let's just go to login dispatcher. Which is calling SNAuth. So let's go to SNAuth. As you can tell, I'm still learning a little bit about the structure of this. So API login is what we're going to call. And let's just go ahead and try that and see what happens. And we successfully log in, but we can't get tasks. So let's fix tasks. Should now work. And we're going to have a similar failure here. So we just need to fix our task detail controller. A couple of places because we're going to add comments here. We're going to get comments there. I think there's one more place.
And as a reminder, this is so that it's a little more clear which tasks we're talking about in the code here, right?
Yeah. This is really to make it very clear that what we're calling is effectively an API versus a page within our server-side app. Because this is sort of this three-tier architecture where we've got ServiceNow, which we're not calling directly. You know, our Angular app is never talking directly to ServiceNow. It's only talking to Express. And so it's just
right. The convention you're using here is that if the browser is hitting it, it's not prefixed with API. If the app is hitting it, if the node code is hitting it, you want API in there. So that's the distinction you're doing.
This is so this is still technically the browser hitting it. This is the app. This is Angular. So right here, this is an Angular scope method that's hitting.
Let's just say your browser, like this isn't a thing you would type in.
Correct. Yeah. The application code is behind the scenes hitting it, but this is not something that the user is going to see in their browser. The user will never go to API task in their browser.
Right, and one of the browser URLs was task / and
exactly
that's why the confusion and hence our trying to clear that up.
Yeah, and I think this is just going to make it a lot easier to reason about the application so that you don't have to go and sort of work your way backwards through it every time you want to do one thing. So I think that's really the key goal. So let's see if that did it. I think that's the last one we're going to do for today. See if we can actually look at the details. Will it work? It does. We get our task. And there we go. So a little bit of refactoring there, just cleaning things up a bit. As we sort of come to the end of our available time here, just to kind of recap the changes that we have made, I can actually do that really easily. So let me do this. I'm going to show you something kind of cool. I'm going to open a local repository in GitHub. Bear with me. And while I'm doing this, do we have any comments, questions, criticisms, heckles?
Do not have any subsequent.
Pretty quiet.
Yeah, we don't have any questions. Corey noted that we called him out by name for his logging story.
Nice. So now that we've done all these things, this is one of the things that I absolutely love about Git, is that I can go back, and in this case, this is just the GitHub desktop app, but I can go back and I can see all the things that I did. So I made changes to the task dispatcher. Here's the new thing that I did for the app itself. Some modifications to the login controller, the login service. So we can see all of these things very clearly, without going and looking for them. So after this is done, I'll go ahead and package these up as commits and get them committed to the repository. And then next time we're on, we can pick up where we left off. And actually, chances are we may be able to go even further with OAuth because of some new shiny things that we'll have available to us by then.
So Josh, when you did the clone, did you explicitly fork because like when I installed mine, I did not explicitly fork anything, right? I just did the git clone from the command line.
Yeah, so for the purposes of the demo today, I get cloned directly from the ServiceNow API or from the ServiceNow repository. But what I would do before I actually go and commit these changes is I would clone from my fork instead. So I'd fork it, clone it from my fork, and then I'm
you would fork on GitHub, and the clone would be from your thing, and then you're committing to your own account.
Exactly.
And then you do a pull request with your changes.
At that point, it's all mine. I don't have to worry about anything else. And then when I'm ready, that's when I can then start packaging up the pull requests and get them merged back into the real thing.
And so what we'll do, you said that you can publicize your fork, and we'll do that. Like when you do the recap for this. So if you just a plug for that is if you go to the developer relations blog on the developer site, we have a blog and we post the recaps. Anything that Josh and I do, we post up there, and there's also an index to every one of these we've ever done, with links to recaps if they exist. And eventually, there will be recaps for everyone we've ever done. It takes time. It's a fairly time-consuming process, so we're working through our backlog as we have spare moments. So.
Now, I don't recall what it was, but last week I was asking that something be put in the recap, but I don't remember what that was.
Something about flight. So it was FlightAware last week, and so was it a reference to the API?
There was some question or something that they seen that evening. I think whether or not some update you were going to check to see what happened when the plane landed.
Yeah, and I never saw this. So the I didn't put that in the recap. I never did see it. So I've got some problem. The other we had an open question. I think maybe it was the open question about whether the FlightAware when you set the endpoint, whether that's a global thing. So like whether you're setting it for a specific, so you set the endpoint and then you call and you say I want to get I want to get events for this particular flight, and then you change the endpoint. Do you change it for existing stuff, or are you And so the answer was it's global. You only have one endpoint ever, and if you change the endpoint, it changes it for all existing ones and all future ones.
Okay, that's good to know.
Which is not the answer I wanted. That's the opposite answer of what I wanted. Because now it means debugging why I'm not getting the callbacks on my instance is like pulling teeth, because there's really nowhere to start. What I wanted to do was verify, was to set a few towards my instance and a few towards request bin or the equivalent, and see like what was happening. And I can't do that because I don't know. So I'm not sure what tools I have. So that's a thing for the future, is figuring out how in the heck I'm gonna find out why I'm getting nothing on those. So, all right, let me de-share you, Josh, and we'll do our wrap up and get on out of here.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so no, that's super interesting, Josh. And like we said, we have decided amongst ourselves to kind of go all in on Node as a platform, right? Where and I'm blank a reveal. Like when I go and do a presentation, when I do the one in London, I'm going to be using reveal.js. Where I'm going to be using Node instead of PowerPoint, right? We're that committed to it. And so it's the same sort of. So Node to me just is philosophically pure with our mission. You know what I mean? It kind of fits with everything. So it just makes sense for us to do that. All right. So I want to thank you, Andrew, for being a guest. And you can see, like, since we started, we can see the sun going down in the background where you are. It's
Oh, yeah. It is definitely, the sun is definitely almost gone here in North Carolina, especially with all the haze from the fires.
All right, let's have a beer recap. I'm giving my Liquid Bliss 4.5. It's one of my favorite beers.
I'll have to give the Winter Lager from Sam Adams a solid 3.75. It's pretty good.
So I actually switched midstream here. So the Highland Gaelic gets a 4.5, and then I actually switched to the Kabar Brown, which is from Aberdeen, North Carolina, from Railhouse, and that is a solid 4.
All right. Here's what I like about Andrew. He's coding globally and drinking locally.
I resemble that remark.
All right. All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Andrew, thank you for being the first guest. We
certainly. I love you guys. You do great things at developer.servicenow.com. If you don't go there, you should.
All right. I love it.
Thanks, Andrew.
A plug from the guest. All right. Thank you, Josh. And as always, my favorite way to ease into the weekend. All right.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.